Here are 5 different aggression archetypes that you can use in Marvel Champions. Hello and welcome to Nelson All Over Cards. I'm Nelson and today we are talking about the aggression aspect in Marvel Champions, and we're going to go through 5 different archetypes that you can play in this red aspect. Now, we have done 2 other of these videos. We've done Leadership and Justice. Those links are down below and they may be popping up here. They may be a little bit off, but yeah, you can find them. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to be walking through 5 different archetypes. We're going to be talking about specific cards in each one of those archetypes and then outlining 3 heroes with some play styles that you can use that lean into that archetype and are really fun and strong in each one of them. I will be timestamping everything down below, so you can go to whatever sounds interesting, or if you want to come back to the video and go to a specific point, you can absolutely do that. It's all there. Hopefully that makes it a little bit easier to jump around and find exactly what you're looking for. Alrighty, so there's a lot of content, so let's just go ahead and get it started. First up, we have what I'm calling the Minion Slayer. This is probably my favorite archetype in the aggression aspect, and which is why I kind of selfishly put it first. This is all about exploiting aggression strength in killing minions. So there's a lot of cards that are so great and reward killing minions in red. And what I will say is, before we get into this, I'm going to cheat just a little bit. I'm going to kind of put 2 archetypes in here because this branches based on whether you're playing solo or multiplayer. We're going to cover a little bit more about that here in a second, but the core cards of this archetype are all about minion slaying. So cards like Relentless Assault is going to be a staple here. Relentless Assault, 2 costs for 5 damage if you pay for it with a physical resource, which is pretty easy to do if you're playing aggression. Then it gets overkill. Cards like Into the Fray, Thor Odin's Son, 1x1 melee, these are all going to be critical and laying down some strategic damage against minions. Now, there are going to be some extreme examples where a minion slayer's only job is going to be taking out minions. That's the only thing they're going to be able to do because you're playing mutagen formula and there's really not a lot that you can do outside of that. Those are some extreme cases, and where the archetype really starts to blossom is when you start adding cards in that reward you for doing your job. So cards like Chase Them Down, now you're removing threat whenever you're defeating an enemy. Or cards like Precision Strike, you get to heal. Battle Fury, you get to ready whenever you defeat a minion. Hall of Heroes gives you the option to draw multiple cards whenever you kill at least 3 minions. And so these are all cards that can really complement the hero kit. And if you need healing, or if you need ways to ready because you have an incredible attack stat, Battle Fury is going to be great. Precision Strike helps you heal. So you can take a look at the strengths of your hero kit. And then you have the strategic damage, and then you can complement it with cards that are going to reward you for doing your job. And this is where we're going to kind of divert and talk about the 2 different branches of this archetype, because it can very much rely on player count. So in multiplayer games, you have a little bit longer. So typically multiplayer games take place over multiple different rounds, and it gives you a little bit more time to set up, and this is where you can start exploiting overkill damage. So cards that lean into overkill are excellent fun and can also be kind of slow to set up in solo matchups, and I've tried, I think it's a lot of fun. It can be done. It absolutely can be done. It's just maybe not the most powerful way to play this type of archetype, but in multiplayer, you got the time to set up. Now we're going to be looking at cards that can exploit it. So the core card here is going to be Follow Through. Follow Through increases your excess damage by 1, and it's not limited to 1 per player. So if you have 3 of these, you can really start having fun and increasing that overkill damage. Or excess damage, actually. Easiest example to look at this is with Relentless Assault. So we deal 5 damage for 2 cost. If we have 3 follow-throughs and we have overkill, we've hit that physical kicker for Relentless Assault. We can hit a minion for 3, overkill 2. Now the follow-through adds 3 to that. So now for 2 costs, we're killing a minion and dealing 5 damage to the villain. So now that gets really kind of efficient, right? And so other cards that can combo in with this are like Hand Cannon. So now your basic attack gets overkill and even more overkill with that follow through. Moment of Triumph allows you to heal. So it's a 0 cost card. After you've defeated an enemy, you get to heal the excess damage that you dealt to that enemy. So Follow through is +3 on that. Into the Fray helps you with threat, so now you can help that Justice player clear the threat from the main scheme. No Quarter helps fuel that card draw engine based on how many extra damage you deal to an enemy, +3. Now with the follow through, discard cards, you get to draw all of those red cards. Now this is some really cool stuff because now we're always looking at excess damage and ways to get overkill, and now that we are the minion slayer, we're the aggression player at the table taking care of minions, we also can lean into and help with the villain damage. The last card that I want to talk about in the multiplayer setting for the minion slayer archetype is going to be Dust. She's a new ally that we've got in the X-Men wave, and she deals 1 damage to every minion on the table, which is not great, but if you compare her with like an attack training or a sidearm, or bump that attack value up, maybe throw a boot camp on the table. Now she's swinging for like 4. You can clear pretty much every single minion on the table with 1 activation of an ally. And so it's a kind of get a panic button. You can hit the panic button, you can clear a lot, and I would look at including Dust maybe in some specific matchups. It's not going to be every single matchup that I would throw Dust into. I wanted to mention her just because she can get you out of a lot of situations. Now, let's talk about the solo side of this. Now in solo, when you're playing solo Marvel Champions, you have to kind of do a little bit of everything. So in your build, while Overkill can be good for some longer fights, it's a little bit slow in solo, and most of the time you can rely on other cards in your kit to deal the damage to the villain. Also in solo play, there may not always be enough minions around the table for you to take advantage of all your cards. In a 4-player game, in a higher player count game, everyone's drawing an encounter card. You're probably going to have a target for your minion slaying cards. In solo play, you reduce that by 75%. You're drawing 1 card probably in the villain phase, and you just may not have a situation where you set up this awesome minion slaying engine and there's just no minions to slay. And so that's where the solo branch kind of comes in, and it's going to be more of a minion searching or a minion grabbing strategy. This is where we get to talk about cards like Looking for Trouble and Angela. They may not be that situationally good for like a multiplayer game where you're bringing more problems out. However, in a solo game, if you play Looking for Trouble, 1, you have a minion now that you can exploit. You can kill, you can get all of your chase them downs, your moment of triumphs. You have options for your cards, as well as getting to remove threat from the main scheme. So it's a similar card to like One Way or Another, right? You get a bad thing, you get a minion on the table, however you get a reward for doing that. And then if you have built up around needing to kill these minions, that's when you can exploit it. Angela is an ally on the table for free for a minion. Now you still want to look at running cards you would run in the multiplayer version of this, like Moment of Triumph, Relentless Assault, but you need to evaluate your hero's kit a little bit more carefully to make sure that you are well-rounded. So if you have a character that has a lot of thwart in their kit, I would probably lean away from cards like Into the Fray and focus more on other pieces like maybe a Relentless Assault to round out the damage side of your kit. So in solo, I think it's a little bit more fun of a challenge to deck build for this type of archetype because you have to balance, okay, I can get all of the minions all the time. I have threat taken care of in my hero kit. Now I need to figure out if I can kill the minions and I can take care of the threat, how am I going to be dealing damage to the villain? And so these are the pieces that you have to, kind of swap out. And it's a modular archetype. So if you take Into the Fray out, and you can add more copies of Relentless Assault or Precision Strike if you need healing. And it's just a way to round out the archetype. I feel like I would not be able to talk about this archetype without the card Bring It. Bring It is a 0-cost card that allows you to draw a card for every minion you have in play, and it can get a little broken. There's no cap on this. If you have 40 minions in front of you, you draw your entire deck. There's no limit on how many cards you can draw with Bring It. Heroes that can maintain the minions and can sustain having a lot of minions in front of them can really exploit Bring It. We'll talk about that when we talk about our heroes here in a second, but it is a card that I think can be a little bit of a trap. It's a very good card if built around and if thought about using it. But if there are not a lot of minions on the table, or if you are killing your minions and then you're helping your teammates around with their minions, Bring It can be a dead card. I guess it's a resource, right? It's a resource card in your hand, but Bring It can be really good and it can be a dud. So I just wanted to talk about it because Bring It can be so powerful in the correct situations, but also it's not an auto include in this strategy because a lot of times you're bringing out the minions and immediately killing them, thus negating Bring It's ability. Okay, let's talk about the heroes. The most fun, and this is not actually an opinion, this is fact, is Thor. Thor's have at the ability allows you to draw 2 cards whenever you engage a minion. So he gets even more benefits running in these minion searching strategies. So in like a multiplayer game, he loves Get Over Here. You may run Looking for Trouble. However, he has Defender of the Nine Realms, which is a better version of Looking for Trouble. So I would leave Looking for Trouble out of his kit. But he is looking for ways to engage minions. He gets +2 cards, which is incredible. It's very, very strong. What is great about Thor is if you do get overrun with the minions and you do have a panic button that is Lightning Strike. To be reset, you can spin the lightning. He has got a thunder, so he has lightning generation. Quinn Carrier helps with that. He can clear minions and he can start over and be okay. There's a lot of options with Thor, and he's come a long way since his release with the current card pool, and he thrives in this archetype. Next up, we're going to talk about Vision. Now, this is where I was talking about we were going to bring back up Bring It. Now, this is a fun build to farm minions while sitting in intangible. So while Vision is intangible, he takes 2 less damage from every single attack. So that means if you have minions that are swinging for 1 or 2, you can let them sit in front of you, build up as many of them as you want, and then you can play Bring It and start drawing 3, 6, 9 cards. And then he can flip up and kill. This can be pretty matchup dependent, but it is pretty powerful if you know what that matchup is, and he can flip up and one-turn kill pretty easily. Finally, we're going to talk about Rocket. Rocket loves overkilling his minions because his Murder Due ability allows you to draw cards after dealing excess damage. So if we build into this overkill strategy, you can include the previously mentioned weapons, but also Rocket packs an arsenal, and Particle Cannon is a key piece here. Particle Cannon helps get some really cool damage as well as gives overkill on minions. He then gets to draw cards, and in a multiplayer game, Rocket wants to kill every single minion on the table and mainly do 1 extra. Also, he is the poster art for Relentless Assault, so he had to make this list. Okay, so the rest of these are not going to have branching paths, I promise. So up next, let's talk about the Troop Commander archetype. This is as close as we're going to get to playing leadership in red, and it had some really cool synergies. So the overall idea is to get some incredibly strong allies on the table and then beef them up with upgrades and supports and let them do the damage for you. The key support here is going to be Boot Camp. It gives all of your allies +1 attack and thus increasing their efficiency even more. This archetype can get pretty tribal in nature, so there are certain upgrades that can only be attached to certain like Guardians or X-Men. But the other one that I wanted to talk about is Sidearm, which is actually a basic card. It gives you a +1 attack and range, so it protects you from that retaliate damage. That works really well for this strategy. And then also we want the allies to stay around for a long time. So First Aid is also a good include for a lot of these decks because a lot of the allies that are going to be swinging for pretty hefty amounts of damage are going to be costing a lot, so First Aid helps keep them around for a longer time. Talking about the tribal cards, and by tribal what I mean is specific to a specific trait. So for like Guardians, we have Energy Spears. So it's a 2 attack plus piercing that can only be attached to Guardian allies. So the targets, the good targets in red are Marvel Boy and Throg, who are okay, but really it gets crazy when we look at our gray allies. Now Cosmo can be insane, especially if you have a scenario where you have a specific deck where you know what cards are in it. So like Red Skull or Infinity Gauntlet, you can indefinitely keep Cosmo around and help him swing forever with 5. So 1, Boot Camp, Sidearm, and then the Energy Spear. And I also just find it funny to think of Cosmo with an Energy Spear, a Sidearm, training at Boot Camp. Cosmo is a situation where I would also run a copy of Brute Force. This is that exploitation scenario where he ignores the additional damage, so it's another instance of +2 attack. So now he's looking at swinging for 7, which is dumb. It's really dumb, but it is very matchup dependent. So Cosmo can be really good in certain situations, but the rest of the team is great as well. So Drax can focus on killing the villain while Rocket handles all the minions. Gamora can help with card draw and just is all around very powerful. The Guardians really like to lean into this type of archetype. We do have options for X-Men as well. They have the attack training card granting a +1 attack and 2 HP. This can be really strong if you can get it to combo with Danger Room, so you can get it on your allies effectively. And I will mention here, this is not necessarily an upgrade or anything, but Team Strike is an interesting include. So while it's not explicitly increasing your allies' attack, it is utilizing that attack and saving the consequential damage. So Team Strike exhausts your hero and any number of X-Men allies, and you get to spread that damage up however you feel. And it can be very powerful, especially if you have boosted up a lot of the allies' attacks. That being said, the allies that they have in red for X-Men are incredible. Wolverine is king here. He gets 6 attack once you get all of the upgrades and supports on him. He has piercing and he gets to heal 1 each round, meaning that if you play it smart, he can stay out the entire game, and he's swinging for 6. Really, really good. Behind Wolverine, we have targets like Dust in a high minion situation, or Colossus when we're looking at great allies who start with that 3 damage and can be increased from there. Some of the heroes that we like to target for the Troop Commander archetype, Doctor Strange had to make the list. Because Cosmo is not trait locked to Guardians, and we can play Energy Spears even if we're not a Guardian, it just has to be on a Guardian ally, we can throw some upgrades on Cosmo and let him cycle Strange's Invocation deck. So even if Cosmo hit for 0 damage, he'd still be very powerful in Strange's deck, allowing him to swap out and get that Invocation card that you need for Strange's ability. But now if he's swinging for 7, then it gets a little crazy. I don't run Strange without Cosmo. And if I'm running in red, then I like to beef up Cosmo so that when he is doing his activation, I actually get some significant damage output from him. Next up is my favorite X-Men for this strategy, and that is Storm. So Storm has access to the X-Men heroes, and she can also make it Thunderstorm, and that is basically another boot camp. It gives everybody +1 attack, and so now your allies from boot camp and Thunderstorm are at +2. So Wolverine is now up to 7 attack with piercing, and that's just fun. Now you do have to figure out how to deal with the villain and all the minions getting +1 attack, but it is really cool to see Wolverine swinging for 7. Now for my third hero, I wanted to talk about a Guardian, but since most of them are pretty good at this strategy, and I already talked about how we can exploit Cosmo with Doctor Strange, I'm going to go with an Avenger instead, and let's talk about Scarlet Witch. So mainly it's not necessarily any ability or any access to cards that she has, but her signature ally Quicksilver is pretty good here. So he doesn't have as high of an attack, but he does have the ability to ready. So he can lay down damage fast. He can come out, if you have a sidearm on him, he's swinging for 3, with boot camp he's swinging for 4, and he can do that twice a round. So now we're looking at 8 damage per round, which is very significant, especially in a solo setting. Quicksilver, Scarlet Witch is my way of getting an Avenger onto this list. For the third archetype, we have the Power Player's Dream, and that's the Swing Big archetype. This could also just be called the Hone Technique build. In the video I did with Villain Theory, he talked about cards to build a deck around, and this is one of the best examples of that in my opinion. So Hone Technique allows you to add the cost of the aggression attack into the damage output as long as you pay for it with a mental resource. That's insane. That makes some of these cards uber efficient. But Hone Technique is not the only piece of this archetype, though it is the most important. But cards like Warrior Skill and Aggressive Energy can also help increase the damage output of different attack events. So while Hone Technique is the biggest part, there are more pieces that you can get even more efficiency out of some of your events. This is great for high cost attacks as well as multi-target attacks. Let's talk about the elephant in the room here real quick, and that is Dive Bomb. So this card gets turned into an 11 damage to a single target and 5 damage to everything at the table, and that's one of the strongest combos in the entire game. Any hero that has aerial can probably win with this combo. That is the best, by far and away, the best way to run this archetype. No questions asked, whatever. Outside of that, let's talk about multi-target attacks. So melee and 1x1 are really strong. So melee is a 3 attack, 3 damage to one enemy, 3 damage to a different enemy. With Hone Technique, it becomes a 6-6, or if we add the other pieces, an 8-8, and it can be really great, especially in multiplayer. Other strong contenders for attack events are going to be Clobber, dealing 3 damage for 2 cost. Now it becomes a 2 for 5, and you get to pull it back if it's the first card you've played. Uppercut becomes a swinging web kick. Into the Fray is really cool, especially in a multiplayer setting where you're dealing 9 damage to a minion and every excess damage removes threat. No Quarter gets to draw even more cards. Pretty much any aggression event is going to get better here, and it's fun to try and piece together what exactly you need. But typically I'm leaning towards higher cost or multi-target attacks. The last little bit of this archetype would be making sure that you have the mental resource to get that kicker for home technique. You have to pay for the aggression event with a mental resource. So wild resource generators like your Quinn carriers or your X-Jets are great. So if you're playing in a multiplayer setting, fight for your copy of that unique card, because that gives you the ability to hit that kicker. Or if you have the genius trait, you can drop ingenuity that can also be a mental resource. And so maybe someone out there is running protection and they really want the Quinn carrier. If you're running a genius character, you have ingenuity that can also generate that mental resource. Power of Aggression is almost always included in this type of deck. A lot of the time we're going to be running at the higher end of the cost curve, so this can really help pay for those cards as well as get that kicker for home technique, because that wild can be treated as a mental. For the heroes, I can talk about aerial heroes all day, but I'm going to limit myself to just one. Just know that anyone, I've said this, just know that anyone with aerial loves this combo. The best one is Nova. Nova is so good. He gets aerial to start the game with. Wild generation starts on the table. And that means you can always hit the home technique kicker. And if that was not enough, he's incentivized to put wild cards like aggressive energy in his deck because his kit cards are cheaper when they're paid for with wild resources. Then, if you play Unleash the Nova Force, you can clear the table with a dive bomb or other combos, and it gets pretty close to like infinite card draw, right? If there are 5 minions on the table, you play a dive bomb, you take out all of those minions, 5 card draw on an Unleash the Nova Force turn. Nova is pretty dumb with dive bomb. But outside of those shenanigans, let's talk about Gambit. Gambit adds another dimension to this archetype because of his charge counters, which can also be added into the attack event's damage. So up to 3 times, he can increase the damage output of these events. So he's also looking for the same type of cards that we would be looking for in this archetype already. So melee that was an 8/8 now maxes at an 11/11, which is probably overkill in most situations, but it does highlight what it can do. But there are situations, multi-villain situations, or minion scaling situations, minion health scaling situations where an 11/11 could be very, very needed. But also now we can look at cards like 1x1. So 1x1 can hit for a 7/7 with 1 resource. Now we're looking at taking out a lot of those elite minions and also hitting the villain for 7 for 1 cost. And this is what's great about his flexibility. He can choose how many charge counters to spend. So if you have 2 5 health minions, you only need to spend 1 charge and you can clear both of them with a 1x1. He has the ability to choose, and that just leans into his flexibility. For the last hero of this archetype, let's give the core set some love. We're going to go with Spider-Man. Since Peter Parker is a genius, he can drop in genius, giving you that needed kicker for home technique. But also since you need 2 mentals to play home technique in the first place, his scientist ability can help with that, getting that initial building block onto the table. But also Spider-Man uses swinging web kick to lean into damage. So this is a 3 for 8 damage, vanilla card, 3 cost, 8 damage. We kind of built our entire math around this card. Now, if you have uppercuts, he has 3 more of those. So now you're running with effectively 6 swinging web kicks, and that can lead to some major consistency in his kit. For our 4th archetype, we have what I'm calling back to basics. This is where we're going to be focusing our build around exploiting the basic attack stack with cards that synergize with it. So first and foremost, we need to talk about combat training. +1 attack helps with pretty much anything, and just know that this strategy is always going to be running a combat training. Now, Adrenaline Rush is the other one that I wanted to kind of talk about. It's a bit more niche, but can combo off for some cool turns, but it is more hero dependent based on how many readies you have or if you think you can really take advantage of it. So now, since this archetype is all about dealing damage using your basic attack, we can play off of that idea. So you have like Skilled Strike or Mean Swing. So Mean Swing, if you have a weapon or you're running hand cannon, are both goods because you are going to be making that basic attack. Skilled Strike gives you +2, Mean Swing gives you +3. So if you have a 3 attack, now you're swinging for 5 or 6. can be very effective. Then the other dimension of this is we want to make sure we can get multiple attacks off every single turn. So any hero that can get a ready in their kit likes this, as well as cards like Battle Fury, which allows you to ready after defeating a minion. So Battle Fury, defeat a minion, you get to ready up and you get to utilize your attack set again that turn. Outside of the basic attack, exhausting to attack, there are cards that synergize with this strategy like Quick Strike, the best defense, and Smash the Problem. I typically look for other ways to defend or thwart because the opportunity cost of playing the best defense or a Smash the Problem is an exhaustion, meaning that we're not actually getting to attack, and that's too high of a cost most times when I'm running this strategy. However, Quick Strike is really interesting. If you can get your attack up to like a 5 or higher, Quick Strike can be efficient damage, right? 2 for 4 is about where we want to be. Now, if we can go higher than that, we're looking at running some Quick Strikes. Like I said earlier, heroes that like to ready really enjoy this strategy. Also, heroes that start or can get to a 3 attack from their kit really lean into this archetype well. The first hero we're going to talk about is Quicksilver, the king of ready. He cannot get 3 attack from his kit, but he can get multiple readies and with his ability, and then his always be running card allows him to swing even more, so he can get up to a 3 attack with his kit and his combat training. And this is actually a hero that I would look at running Adrenaline Rush, especially if I know that I have a couple of always be runnings ready to go off to combo with it. Up next, we have Ant-Man. Ant-Man has a 3 attack in his giant form. Once you get combat training and his 2 copies of giant strength on the table, whenever you flip into giant form, you have 6 attack, meaning that you can swing a lot. A card that I didn't mention before, but I want to talk about with Ant-Man is Brute Force. I don't typically like this because we want to be utilizing our basic attack and we have to discard Brute Force after we do that. However, if we load up Ant-Man with 3 copies of Brute Force, your quick strikes are going to be very, very powerful. When he's flipping up, he has 9 attack. Now, you can play a quick strike for 9 attack. If you go Adrenaline Rush, which is probably more theoretical than it is actually beneficial, but you can get up to like a 12 attack, and now you're doing 2 for 12, and then you have a basic attack for 12, so you can do 24 damage in 1 turn. Now, that's really cool theory. It's probably not super strong, but it can highlight how good it can get, and there is diminishing returns. So if you have the giant strength, you have the combat training, 2 for 6 is very effective. If you run the brute force, maybe it's worth it to run a couple of brute forces or a couple of adrenaline rushes. He also, since he has the changing form mechanic, you can combo with a ready to rumble, getting you multiple activations every single turn. And finally, we have Drax. Drax is fun. Drax can get up to 5 attack before combat training, which bumps him to a 6. So every time you attack, 6 damage, insane. Plus, with his 14 health pool, you have access to cards like Limitless Stamina, allowing you to ready and get even more activations with that 6 attack. Every single time he attacks, it triggers D3 Mastery and gets you that card draw, and this is a fun build. If you have not tried Drax, just bumping his attack stat up as fast as you can, it's pretty cool. It's pretty fun. For the last archetype I'm covering in this video, we have Rush. So shout out to Brant from Step Into the Portal. Everything I've learned about Rush is from him, and I'm going to put some of his videos, his contact information, his channel is down below as well, but also you can check out his videos here so you can see what the Master of Rush looks like. Now, this archetype is all about winning fast and not necessarily worrying about any other threats other than what's stopping you from crossing that finish line. This works best for solo and maybe 2-player games, and it can be pretty villain dependent. Lower health pools are much better for the strategy, but someone like Thanos you may struggle with. Someone with a lot of health may struggle, or someone with a lot of guard minions or a lot of tough could be an issue. That being said, you're typically looking to win in about 3 rounds. So generically speaking, you're looking at, on turn 1, you're going to flip up and throw as much damage as you can. You're going to take a hit from the villain. Turn 2, you're going to throw damage and you're going to flip back down to Alter Ego. The villain's scheming, you're probably going to lose that first scheme. Turn 3, you're going to flip up and kill the villain. Now, this is where we need a lot of damage output. Surprise Attack and Clobber are great damage that I'm looking to always be including in this type of strategy. And also because we want to be hitting the villain every turn, we want basic attacks to trigger, so Skilled Strike is also a good include. Dropkick here is interesting, and it can help protect your hero if you have like a lower health pool, or maybe even extend that game into one more turn. You can win in 4, maybe 5, but I would try and win in 3. Dropkick helps extend that to 4 if you can stun and protect your health a little bit. The last card that I want to talk about before we start talking about allies here is Counterattack. So you're taking a hit from the villain. Counterattack allows you to turn that right around and throw it back at the villain. So if the villain's hitting you for 5, Counterattack can hit him back for 5, and it allows you a much easier time to swing and make sure you kill him in those 3 turns. Allies are interesting and can be pretty good depending on your specific deck build. So like Hulk here is pretty good, especially if you flooded your deck with physical resources, which a lot of the cards that I mentioned previously have those physical resources. Statistically speaking, Hulk should be swinging for 5 very, very cheaply, and he can take a surprise hit. Jane Foster, Thor can come in. She can hit the villain for 5 if you pay for it with a physical resource. Should be pretty easy, and then she can also just continually hit the villain as well. For the heroes, typically heroes that have a lot of damage in their kit work well here. Wolverine is a great example. I'm going to put a video here showing me rushing with Wolverine. Wolverine is really, really good because he can take damage to pay for attack events, and he can throw that damage so uber efficient. He has 6 attack events, and they can all have piercing if you utilize their claws, so it eliminates the tough issue. And if you flood with even more attack events, you're probably never running into a dead hand. Now, in the video that I linked before, I had a dead hand and I still won in 3 turns. That shows how efficient Wolverine can be. Next up, we're going to talk about Wasp. So she has the same benefit as Wolverine with 5 attack events in her kit, as well as she has 2 rapid growths. So these are events that say that whenever you make a basic attack, you get to change to your hero form and you get +2 for that basic attack. Actually, it's any of the stats, but we're talking about attack here. So she has ways to get more attack damage. If you can combo that with a skilled strike, that's a 6 swing, which is pretty good. She can trigger surprise attack every single turn, and not just when you're flipping from alter ego to hero on turn 1 or 3. So she has the ability to utilize surprise attacks, which are very efficient. And then whenever she flips back down, she can use her girl ability to shuffle any pinpoint strikes back into your deck, just increasing that likelihood of drawing into the major attack events again. Wasp is an interesting build, and I think has a little bit more complex decision making than a lot of the other rush strategies. Rush strategy is complex, but with Wasp, you really have to think about where you want to be and what form you want to be in. Tiny, giant, alter ego. It's some cool decision space there. And then finally, we're going to get some more core set love, Captain Marvel. So Captain Marvel has a great economy. She has energy absorptions, card draw with her rechannel ability, and it basically just means that you can go get the card that you need at the right time. I think she's a little bit more interesting to deck build for because she loves energy resources. So instead of focusing on physical, we're focusing on the energy resource, and she can really capitalize on anything that you add. So when we're looking for cards to build for her, we're looking for energy to help fuel Photonic Blast and her really big damage card, Energy Channel, which can deal 10 damage at a critical time. It's a cool deck building challenge, and really effective, especially because she has so much cycling in that kit. So these are not all of the archetypes for aggression, and it's not all the heroes that work in each slot. So let me know which ones I didn't talk about or what your favorite heroes are down below in the comments. I'd like to hear about them. If you enjoy this content, I do a lot of LCG content. If that is interesting to you, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. It does help out a lot. Thank you all for hanging out, and I hope you have some fun being aggressive with the red aspect. See you around.